This show is not a substitute for professional counseling, and no relationship is created between the show host or guests and any listener. If you feel you are in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, we encourage you to contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or insurance company. If it is an emergency situation, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.
It's 6 o'clock and time again for Brain Matters, the official radio show of the UA Counseling Center. We are broadcasting from the campus of the University of Alabama. Good evening. My name is Dr. B.J. Guenther, and I'm the host of the show along with my colleague and producer, Catherine Howell. And in case you don't know, this show is about mental and physical health issues that affect college students, and in particular UA students. So you can listen to us each Tuesday night at 6 p.m. on 90.7 FM, or you can listen online at wbuafm.ua.edu, and you can also download the MyTuner radio app and type in WBUA FM 90.7. Listen to us that way. I'm always asking, every week I always ask for ideas for upcoming shows. We're midway through the semester. I think tonight is our 6th or 7th show, and we'll probably need ideas definitely for the fall shows. We don't do shows in the summer, so we'll finish up our spring semester at the end of April and the beginning of May. So if you have ideas for any shows that you want to hear about, email those ideas to me at brainmattersradio@wbuafm.ua.edu, and I'll consider using your show topic idea. Also, if you have questions for our guest tonight, email those to me, and we'll take them and try to answer them here on the air. Tonight's topic, I can't remember, Catherine, maybe you can remember. It's been a long time since we've done a show on ADHD, and I don't know why, because it's pretty prevalent here on our campus, or I'll say with the students I see. And I know we've done shows in the past over the 10 years that we've done this show about ADHD, so I don't think it would be bad to actually revisit it every year, actually, because there's always something trending. In fact, I heard of a new medication from a student this past week, and I had never heard of this before, and now I can't even remember the name of it. If you called it, I would know it. But tonight our topic is your brain's not broken, strategies for navigating your emotions and life with ADHD. That's actually a title of a book written by our guest, and I'm going to get to her introduction in just a minute. But on one hand, you might feel relieved after learning that the symptoms you've experienced are because of a medical condition. On the other hand, you might feel scared, as there's still a lot of stigma attached to ADHD. But thankfully, that is changing. And for many people living with ADHD means adopting new tools to help them manage their symptoms, which helps them to thrive in their emotional health, personal relationships, and their careers. My guest tonight is Dr. Tamara Rosier. Let me see if I can say that again. It's been a long day here at the Counseling Center. We're coming up on spring break. Let's see, in less than 2 weeks, and it cannot get here soon enough. I'll just admit that. Dr. Rosier is the author of Your Brain's Not Broken, Strategies for Navigating Your Emotions and Life with ADHD. She's also the founder of the ADHD Center of West Michigan. Thanks for being here again. I appreciate it. You're on Eastern time zone, so you're a little later over there, and so I know it's a little bit harder. Your day's been probably a little bit longer than mine.
Yeah. And we just had I live in Michigan. We just had an ice storm yesterday.
Yeah.
So we're doing all kinds of clearing up, and it's
bad. I watch the Weather Channel every morning when I wake up, and it's pretty bad. An ice storm is worse than the blizzard that's out in the other part of the western part of the country, I think, because ice, there's probably a lot of power outages, I would imagine. What part of Michigan are you in?
I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I run the ADHD Center of West Michigan.
Yes.
And yes, and I live about 45 minutes outside of Grand Rapids. So,
I believe our executive director is from Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Well, it's a great place to be from. So, yes.
He's a wonderful person. Tell the listeners, I gave a little bit of introduction for you, but tell the listeners about yourself, your credentials, and why you're interested in this topic.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I have an ADHD resume, right? I started teaching high school, and I taught English for 8 years. And then as many ADHD people do, I have ADHD. I thought, okay, well, I love teaching, but I'm bored with that right now. So I went to be a college professor, and that's where I got my PhD. And I taught educational psychology and a lot of teaching prep courses for undergrad teachers. I taught a few grad courses here and there. And then it's about 8 years, and then I left higher education and then started the ADHD Center. ADHD has affected every nook and cranny of my life. And if you have ADHD, I just want your listeners to know, no, you didn't grow out of it. Yes, someone else in your family most likely has it. And no, your brain's not broken. But you need to understand that it works very differently. Mm-hmm. And I wrote the book, Your Brain's Not Broken, just because I wanted people to, it's almost a love letter to people. I know that sounds corny, but so that they understand, like, it's not broken, but you have a different operating system.
Well, and actually, I wanted to talk about this article that I read. I got it. I cannot remember where I got it from, but I always read some articles and do a little bit of research before the shows. And I really like the title, 6 Strengths and Benefits of ADHD, because you're always hearing about the negative part of it. Yeah. And this article was so positive and really interesting to talk about, like, what are the benefits? There are benefits of having ADHD.
There aren't. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to be oppositional right out of the gates with you. I have ADHD, and I also know what the research says. And the research says that there's really no gifts that come with ADHD. Everything that is a strength in an ADHD person is something that either character put there, or it's a personality strength. It's not, ADHD itself is not a strength. And here's why. I live every day with ADHD. I'm considered high functioning. And darn it, I hate being in my own brain a lot of the time. People with ADHD have executive function issues, as you know, which means we have short-term memory issues. We have working memory issues. Oh, and guess what? The whole book is about emotional regulation issues. This is such a heavy burden to carry with ADHD that we need to start taking it seriously. So I know a lot of people want to just kind of fly that freak flag and go, yay, I'm gifted, I have ADHD. It's not a gift. No, whatever is good in you.
Actually, I hear the opposite. And that's why I brought it up, because I hear the opposite. I feel like it's been pathologized so much so that some of these students who come in here and talk to me, they feel broken, like the title of your book.
Right. So I'm in the middle.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, it's not a gift. It's exhausting. And I will say, I talk about this in the book. It's exhausting to be a person with ADHD in the modern world. Put me back in a survival situation, I'll feel thrilled. But I'm kind of in the middle of, it's a neurological difference.
Yes.
So let's just put it right back. And I love that you have a positive heart and want to be positive. And I'm sorry, I just kind of came out of
No. I'm still gonna challenge you, because I understand ADHD is a neurological issue, but some of the benefits are very creative students. I've met very creative students, and they're struggling. Don't get me wrong. I'm not taking that away from them. Their struggle, and that's why they come in here. Yeah. But they're also being told by other people, like teachers and parents, and their friends, that they talk too much, or that, you've probably heard that. And so I try to put a spin on it being their therapist.
So
even if they're taking medication,
So what ADHD people bring.
And resilience too.
Yep. Well, here's the thing. If it were a gift of ADHD, we would see it with everyone, right?
Yeah.
So whenever you see resilience, you're like, look, you're running this race, even though you started out way behind, and good for you.
Yeah.
Because there's something, it's not ADHD that's giving it to you. You're digging deep and getting it elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so now there is a neurological difference. ADHD folks tend to be divergent thinkers, which means we look creative. But in my book, I talk about how we have to manage that divergent thinking.
Yeah.
And we be careful with that.
Ooh.
Because, that's how we end up down in rabbit holes.
Yes.
So my divergent thinking
Yes.
can make me look like a genius.
Yes.
And I put two things together that people hadn't thought of. And they're like, wow, that's great. But then I'm also crawling down rabbit holes on the internet. And that's divergent thinking too.
Yeah.
An example how divergent thinking is just a neurological difference. It's not a gift or a curse. It's just how we use it. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Is it inevitable? I'm just going to ask you point blank. Is it inevitable for someone who is, and how old were you when you were diagnosed?
Oh, not till way old.
So you were able to compensate your whole life, probably, even though it was probably a struggle.
Yeah. And maybe after the break, we can talk about the 6 unhealthy ways people compensate, because I used all of them to get through my PhD process.
Is it inevitable that someone has to be prescribed medication?
No.
Okay.
I take the viewpoint. If you're nearsighted and you need glasses, it just makes life a lot easier. So I don't shame people for not treating it with meds. I don't shame people for treating it with meds. It's really your choice. I do think it levels the playing field. If you're working on a degree, you take in and process information differently.
Yes.
Many times more accurately on medication.
Well, and the issue, I guess it's happening nationwide, is the shortage of Adderall. Yep. In case people don't know, there is a shortage of Adderall.
Right. And
I think I'm having some students come in panicking.
Mm-hmm. So for those students, first of all, Adderall, I got to tell you, Adderall is an old drug. It's like using an axe to cut a loaf of bread. Like, yeah, it works. It cuts the bread, but you kind of mangled the bread. So I really like the more elegant, like Concerta. Vyvanse is different, but there's different. Journey is a magical little drug that you can take at night. Sits in your stomach. You wake up fully medicated.
There you go.
That's like LASIK surgery for those of us who wear glasses. You just wake up and you can see. So there's more sophisticated delivery mechanisms of the stimulants that are more reliable anyway.
I think some medical doctors get used to prescribing the same things.
Yeah.
That's what I see on campus, especially.
Yeah. And Adderall's it's just really harsh on your system because you have a quick uptake and you have a quick, when it leaves your
crash. Body. Basically a crash. Yeah.
And it's exhausting.
Did you know, do you know the new medication that I mentioned that I cannot remember the name of? Does that ring a bell?
Yeah. Does it start with an X, like a Zilix?
Maybe.
Yeah. I can't.
It's not easy to pronounce, and that's why I'm not thinking about it. But that was my first student who's been prescribed that. And, I just wonder if I have had students who have tried to come off of medication, and then eventually have to go back on it or choose to go back on it, after a year or so.
Yeah. Well, and there's no shame. There's no shame. Yes. I have to tell you, I've been careful about my stimulant today because, by the way, stimulants, like Adderall, Concerta, they work for about 80% of us with ADHD. Yeah. Well, that's really cool. And that's a simple fix. So today, because I had this interview, I've kind of managed my stimulant so that I have enough energy and brain power to talk to you tonight.
Well, and that you'll be able to go to sleep tonight too, because I have students who they're trying to, maybe they've been diagnosed, maybe they have compensated and made it this far without a diagnosis, and then they've been diagnosed here while they're at school, and then they're placed on medication, and it's just a jolt, no pun intended, to their system, and they're given maybe 2 doses, one for the morning and one for the afternoon. And they really, the medical doctors sometimes just leave it up to them to judge what they need.
Yeah. And none of this is okay. None of this is okay.
Scary.
Yeah. None of this should work like this. So, yes.
Well, and when I first started working here many years ago, Adderall was a big time recreational drug. Big time. It probably still is, but we're trying to do a better job here on this campus of requiring testing.
Yeah.
Before you are prescribed medication. I hope people are listening to that. Let's take our first break. You mentioned it. Let's take our first break, and then when we come back, let's talk about those 6 unhealthy ways that people compensate, because I can't wait to hear this. So come back, and you're listening to Brain Matters on 90.7 The Capstone.
WVUA-FM, Tuscaloosa.
This show is not a substitute for professional counseling, and no relationship is created between the show host or guest and any listener. If you feel you are in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, we encourage you to contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or insurance company. If it is an emergency situation, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.
Listening to Brain Matters on 90.7 The Capstone. I'm BJ Guenther, and we're talking tonight about ADHD. And my guest is Dr. Tamara Rosier, who wrote, it sounds like a fascinating book. And I know there are a lot of books out there about ADHD, but yours is titled Your Brain's Not Broken, Strategies for Navigating Your Emotions and Life with ADHD. How long did it take you to write the book, and when was it released?
Yes, it was released September 21, and I wrote it during lockdown. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
Not
really, but
yeah, during that time, I had COVID 3 times. I had sinus infections. I was just a hot mess. I don't know how I wrote a book, to be honest. I'm just going to be honest. So I'm working on the second book right now. And
do you do workshops with the book? Have you thought about that?
I do. Yes, there's actually a workbook being released. That's not for 3 years out.
Oh.
Got to wrap up my next book first. So, yeah. And my next book is on how to family when you have ADHD.
So you're the first book, the one that we're talking about tonight, it's mainly for people who have been diagnosed, not necessarily clinicians.
It's not really. I have a lot of therapists who recommend it to their
clients, patients. Yeah.
Yeah. However, I wrote it for the ADHD person. And the feedback I'm getting is, I get emails. I have the best readers in the world. But they're like, I cried when I read this. I saw
it hit home, didn't it?
It hit home.
Mm-hmm.
But then I don't leave them there, right? I try to offer hope.
Yeah.
And so, but I did also write it kind of with the neurotypical, the person without ADHD, being able to read it and follow it. Just so that a family member could learn about
That's what I was going to say. That would be a good educational tool for parents.
Yes.
But like you said, when we first started talking, you said most likely somebody in your family has ADHD. Or when you do this, explain the difference between ADHD, ADD. Is there a combined type? I think there is.
Yeah. So it's all called ADHD these days.
Okay.
And you guys know this, but in order to diagnose, we use something called the diagnostic
statistical manual.
Statistical manual.
DSM, I got it.
Wow, I glitched there.
I know, it's been a long day.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for getting my back right away with that. The problem is we call that the DSM. The DSM is at least 20 years behind on what research says about ADHD.
Isn't that something? And probably a lot of other things too.
Yeah, I don't even want to think about other things. I mean, yeah. So for example, emotional dysregulation is one of the biggest problems of having ADHD. And the DSM doesn't even mention it. Well, holy cow, that's a big problem.
That's a big problem.
So getting accurately diagnosed is becoming problematic. And we're hoping the DSM will kind of pick up on this.
You just brought this up, and I know a little bit about this because I send people to get testing. What is the typical testing that's used? Is there a definitive test for ADHD, or is it a battery of tests? I've had some doctors that I've sat in with, some psychiatrists that just use checklists.
I know.
Tell me.
Boo.
I know.
Yeah.
Scary. I mean, I'm just going to keep saying that.
Yeah, it is scary because here's the problem. ADHD can mimic other things.
Big time. Yes.
Right.
Anxiety. I mean, think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's a huge problem. And so really the gold standard is to look at ADHD through several lenses. So not just a checklist. We want different instruments. Here's the problem. There's not one test for ADHD. Right. And I try to explain that to people. So it's kind of confusing a little bit to me, because how do you definitively determine that it is ADHD? You're looking for certain criteria. Yes. So I have a good friend. He's an MD who focuses on ADHD folks and medicating. And he said, well, you can't say definitively someone has ADHD. Yep. You can only say they don't not have it. Interesting. And if those stats students who are listening, you understand why you use that double thing. So in all the years that I've seen students, I've only had one student who did the testing and was not diagnosed. Mm-hmm. I think that's odd. We deal with that at our center. And so we have to work with that, because if they come to the ADHD center because they're like, gosh, I think I have ADHD, and we find ADHD, well, that's reasonable that we would find it. But we actually have a great therapist here who does do differentials, and we run a differential diagnosis because we have to think, well, is it narcolepsy? I mean, what if there's a sleep disorder here that can work with and look like ADHD? Mm-hmm. I will be honest though, if there's a family history of ADHD, I am very likely to consider ADHD. Yeah. Barkley is putting out numbers like if dad has ADHD, between 80 and 90% likelihood a child could have it. And sometimes when I interview our students, and Catherine probably can support this too, the first time I interview a student, a lot of times they don't know. They don't know if their family has any mental health issues, and especially if it's ADHD. Right. Yeah. When I was in college, I was undergrad and I was in teacher education. And I called my dad and said, Dad, I'm reading about this thing. Now, remember, I'm super old. So this was like the 80s, right? Yes. ADHD was quite... I'm there with you. Greatest decade ever. I just want to, stay real for your listeners. Like, this was not yesterday, folks. No. But I said, there's this thing I'm reading. And back then it was called ADD. Yep. And I'm like, it's ADD. And I read the symptoms. I'm like, wow, this sounds like what we have. And my dad said, no, that's a made up thing. That's real. Everyone thinks like this. Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. And then guess what? I became a teacher. And you know who I was great at teaching? Those at-risk students. Oh, I bet. Oh, by the way, they all had ADHD. I spoke the language. Yeah. And so it was like such an easy, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but ADHD people link up. And it's like we almost have our secret language. Yeah. You'll see us talking more quickly, filling in each other's. I see it all the time in my office. And the neurotypical person will go, Wait, I
What
don't
are they
understand
talking
what's
about?
happening.
Yes. It's like you're in the twilight zone.
Yeah.
And I don't think some people probably realize that. I bet some students, I'll have to ask if they do that, if they link up with other friends.
The other thing, though, we do is we can emotionally arouse each other. And so if you ask one of your clients, like, well, who in your family do you fight with the most? It's usually the ADHD parent. Really? Because then we're trying to, your listeners can't watch my hands escalate. But what happens is we escalate one another. And so ADHD folks are the best of friends and the worst of friends.
Almost like competitiveness.
It's emotional competitiveness.
That's what it sounds like. One of the articles I read said that, I'm just going to read this point from the article, that said anyone can, and you tell me if you agree or disagree, anyone can receive an ADHD diagnosis at any point during their lives. However, symptoms of ADHD must be present by the age of 12 to receive such a diagnosis. While some people may not know they have ADHD until adulthood, the condition must have developed in childhood for a diagnosis. I don't know about that. What do you think?
I'm glad you're suspicious of that. So here's why the DSM states that, right? But the problem with this is, let's take, and I'm positive some of your listeners fall into this. They're incredibly bright, incredibly hardworking. And they're just going to muscle I had a daughter like this, their way through school. So it doesn't show up before 12. You know when it showed up for my oldest? Last year in college.
Ooh, like 20 or 21.
Yeah.
How did, can I ask you this? And this is the term I use. How did she hit the wall?
And you know what? I use the same thing. Every ADHD person will hit the wall at some point and go, oh crap, I'm not playing with my neurological rules. Yes. And this is the problem.
You're right.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I use the same terminology. So this is a nice, if you don't mind, if I tell you the 6 bad tools people use.
Yes, please do. I was going to get to that, but we got off on a tangent.
That's okay, because it goes in with my daughter. I'll just pick on her. I don't think she'll listen. And, I'll ask for forgiveness later. Yeah. I did write about her in the book, so I think it was a blank. So here are the 6 bad tools. So if you know, ADHD people don't have reliable access to their prefrontal cortex. And so if your listeners kind of tap their forehead, that's where your prefrontal cortex is. That's like that calm, rational butler that says, hey, let's just do the next thing. ADHD folks don't have that. And frankly, we're poor at sequencing activities. So what we do is we go to a different part of the brain called the limbic center, and we kind of rely on, we're method actors going, what's my motivation here? And so we try to kind of find an emotion to motivate us.
Interesting.
And so when my daughter hit the wall, I saw all the emotions motivating her. So the first one is anxiety. And smart young women will use, and I say women specifically, because they'll get misdiagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder.
Yep.
But they're really using anxiety as gasoline. They scare themselves out of bed in the morning just to do it.
Oh my gosh.
That, my friend, is anxiety being used to motivate. Right?
Is it because it's such a struggle?
Yes.
That's what it is.
Initiation is so difficult every day. And it's just exhausting. So that's why a lot of people are using anxiety. You see test anxiety, social anxiety, all the anxieties. If you kind of ask the questions, you'll get to that this is kind of used as momentum to get something done.
Oh my gosh. And I'm sitting here thinking how many students have been misdiagnosed with GAD?
Yep.
Oh my gosh. So what's the second one?
Okay. The second one is avoidance. I hear this all the time with my students. Now, my daughter didn't do this one, but it's, hey, I have a huge exam. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go clean my sock drawer.
Oh, gosh, yes. I call it distraction. Would it be the same thing?
Same exact thing. I wish I called it distraction. That was a better word for it. But you're avoiding what you really have to do to get the short-term dopamine fix. Because now you open the drawer and look how pretty it is. I've literally have pictures of a sock drawer in my text because they're like, yeah, I didn't study, but look how pretty. I lined them up in rainbow colors, right?
That sounds like that book I'm sidebar. It's a crazy book, but it's the life-changing, what is it? The book by Marie Kondo. Somebody who is ADHD. No. That's
exactly it. And so that's really unfortunate how we will do something else. Distraction.
Yeah.
Yep. And so the next one is procrastination. And all your listeners know that one. We use it like it's our job.
Well, and a lot of students, that's the reason they will come in here sometimes. The two reasons I think are the most popular reasons to get somebody in here would be procrastination and sleep problems.
Okay, every ADHD person has a sleep issue. Every ADHD person has a sleep issue.
Oh my gosh.
You don't know how to go to bed, when to go to bed, or how to turn off our brains.
Right. Wow.
Or we can't stay asleep.
Is that one of the 6?
No, that's not one of the 6.
Okay.
That's a freebie I just threw in there.
Wow. But that's something we need to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. And your clients are messing this one up big time. Mm-hmm. And this will make our ADHD a lot worse. So procrastination is when you it's like you have a campfire and you're just watching it and you're leaving it unattended until it becomes a raging forest fire. And then
I love it. I love that analogy.
All this adrenaline. And then we're the heroes of our own story. I mean, I've had students come in, want a high five because they're like, yep, I stayed up all night doing this paper in a night, even though I had all semester to do it. I'm sticking it to the man. And that's procrastination. You got high off of procrastination.
Well, and it's puzzling to me because it's just so, to me, it's so obvious. Like, for me, if I procrastinate, it stresses me out so much. So to avoid the stressing out, I do what I need to do and get it over with, and then I can enjoy my night, blah, blah, blah. You've heard that. And that's what's puzzling to me is they don't get an enjoyment out of that. So when we work on tactics or strategies to help with procrastination, I don't know, sometimes it doesn't work because they're not getting that, what you're talking about, that like instant gratification.
Right. Well, and remember, this isn't a logical decision. So what you just said just demonstrated neurotypical thinking.
Yes.
You are the poster child. Exactly what you said. This is neurotypical thinking.
Yes.
Now, I would be like, okay, I have this paper. I don't want to do this paper. This paper makes me feel yucky. I don't want to do this paper. Why did I even take this class? I'm not even sure I like the professor. You know what? I didn't like the way she looked at me that one day. And
you go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. So I'm conjuring up all these feelings. Now, I might still do the paper out of spite because I hate this professor so much.
Yes.
That I decided out of an emotional basis to do this paper. And
because you can.
Yep. That's the fourth one. That's anger. In other words, I'm just conjuring all kinds of anger. True story. I made it through some of my PhD classes like that, but we don't need to go into those details. But
that's another session. I always say that's another
session. For the art of spite, just to get good grades. And again,
it's motivator. It's a motivator. Anger motivates.
But the problem is it takes so much energy to do.
Yes, it does. Oh, yeah.
Whereas you go, hey, guess what?
Yeah.
I'm going to do this, and then I'll reward myself by watching TV. That's task initiation, reward. And instead, we do this kind of convoluted dance with emotion. So the last two, very quickly, are shame and self-loathing.
Self-loathing? Is that what you said?
Yeah. And remember, in a motivational way. So I am going to shame myself into doing it. Like, darn it, I know I have to do this assignment. And Tamara, you didn't do the other one on time. And I'm so mad at you. And it's like, I'm shaming myself.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes.
And then the last one is self-loathing. And this is so horrible. Self-loathing is when I literally hate myself into doing something.
No, I hear that.
I know you do. As
I hear that.
I know you catch the self-loathing a lot.
Yeah. And it's really kind of hard to, you can't talk somebody out of that. Do you know what I mean? You just can't talk them out of that. They have to start being able to produce, I don't know any other way to say it, to build that self-esteem, and then that self-loathing dissipates a little bit.
It's a coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to be really honest. And I hate this, but I didn't understand how deeply I hated myself for years, just to motivate myself.
Yeah. Because were you looking at it like you were a failure?
Oh, I was a failure. I already screwed up.
Yeah. It'll never be fixed. Yeah. I think I missed a break, Catherine. I'm sorry. Were you holding up? This is so fascinating. I feel like there's so much to talk about that an hour's not even going to do it, but we'll do our best. So let's take another quick break and come back. And I haven't even checked to see if there's any emails. Well, let me check when we're in the break to see if there's any emails. So come back. You're listening to Brain Matters on 90.7 The Capstone. We'll be right back.
WVUA-FM, Tuscaloosa.
This show is not a substitute for professional counseling, and no relationship is created between the show host or guests and any listener. If you feel you are in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, we encourage you to contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or insurance company. If it is an emergency situation, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.
Hey, you're back listening to Brain Matters. I'm Dr. BJ Guenther. We're talking tonight about ADHD, and I don't think we talk about it enough. It's been a long time since I've had this topic. We're talking about the book, Your Brain's Not Broken, Strategies for Navigating Your Emotions in Life with ADHD, and the author is Dr. Tamara Rosier. Tamara is the founder of the ADHD Center of West Michigan. Tell me how long that's been in existence. How did you do this?
In the most ADHD way possible. I didn't set out to be a business owner. I'm an English major, guys, so I didn't do any of this on purpose. I was kind of looking to get out of higher ed, and I was having lunch with someone, and it happened to be my friend who is the ADHD doctor. And he said, "You'd make a great ADHD coach." And I said, "Really? Is that a thing?" And so today I can tell you it is a thing. I'm the president of the ADHD coaching organization.
Wow.
It's a relatively new field. So I started off by myself, and then I decided I don't like working alone. There's too many people that need help. And I really do like leading teams. And so I started recruiting people. And I've got to tell you, I'm so proud of the team at the ADHD Center. I love them. They're great. They're good for people. And a lot of times at the center, we talk about, we hold the hope for people until they can hold it themselves.
That's good. So we have
coaches, therapists, all kinds.
Well, and we have a real issue here in our city, which is not tiny, and we're not a suburb, but we're about 50 miles from Birmingham. Tuscaloosa is where we are. And it's so difficult to find people to do testing. They're so backed up. The wait list is ridiculous for most people. And we end up either referring them back to their hometowns where they've come from, or either to Birmingham usually, or sometimes. And it's just that's very challenging.
Yeah, it is. It's really a mess right now. And now just a caveat, our therapists can only, and this, diagnose in the state of Michigan.
Yeah.
Because that's where they're licensed. So
we don't we don't have that capabilities either for right now, as far as I know. Catherine and I were talking about this yesterday, actually, and maybe I'm wrong. Is it true for the psychologists here in Alabama? Catherine, do you know?
About diagnosing?
Yeah.
I think the psychologists can, but even like licensed social workers, technically we can't diagnose in the state of Alabama, period, for anything, even though we can for insurance.
Yeah, we can't either. We use diagnostic impression is what I'm a licensed professional counselor. Let's take one email question, Tamara. This is an interesting one, and one that you can speak to because you're like me. We didn't grow up with a lot of technology, and we've come into technology. This question is, how is technology changing the way we test for ADHD? That's more specific. I just saw technology and I just thought, well, how is technology helping with ADHD? There's two questions right there.
Yeah. So I love the listener's question because that is a great question. There are more and more accurate tests for executive function. And so at our center, we use the QB test, which is great for testing executive functions. Now, as I just said, though, there's a lot of other parts to ADHD.
Yes.
So we're getting really good at, through technology, being able to look at executive functions.
Wow.
And we're being able to do it cheaper and cheaper. Right. In fact, something we're doing at the center is, hey, your medication isn't working. Let's test it. Let's test your executive functions on this medication. And that we can do actually across state lines. But the diagnostic part of the emotional observation and the emotional dysregulation, that still has to be done through interviewing.
Yes. What do you know and what do you think of genetic testing for ADHD? I've read a little bit about it.
Yeah.
Just wondered about it.
So, this is an interesting area. I'm following it very closely because there's a strong hereditary link. I was talking to an anesthesiologist who has ADHD, right? She's one smart cookie. And she said, Tamara, I can't believe this. In medicine, if we saw anything above a 0.1 correlation, we'd pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And ADHD has at least a 0.6 or higher. So this is about darn time we're looking at this.
Yes.
Now, the problem is, and the thing I'm going to caution everyone on is, we don't really understand DNA yet. We are still just in the early years.
Yes.
So some of us have like an MTHFR gene variation. A lot of ADHD folks have it. We shouldn't use that to tell if you have ADHD or not. So we really have to be very, very careful. I still think back at the top of the hour when we were talking about, you really want to look for ADHD from a multiple instrument perspective.
Well, and two, a lot of our therapists around here are getting credentialed in EMDR.
Yes.
That's a form of therapy, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, I think is what it is. What do you think about that treatment? That's a non-medication treatment. Yeah. That I have heard, because I've had a couple of shows about EMDR, and one of the things they talk about is what all does it treat? What all can it help? What do you think about EMDR?
I love it. We have a therapist here who is excellent at it, and we have seen reduction in symptoms. So here's why EMDR works. Theory by Tamara Rosier. That's the asterisk, okay?
Disclaimer.
Comment. Okay. So remember I said we can't reliably access the prefrontal cortex, but EMDR kind of skips that part of the brain and says, hey, let's go back to the part that doesn't really have language.
Wow.
And that's where ADHD heavily rely on, right? The emotional centers. Yeah. I think it is the most promising thing we've seen in ADHD treatment since medication.
I think you're right. And a lot of people at first are kind of tentative about it, especially when I do a terrible job of explaining it. And people look at me and I'm like, it's not hypnosis. because when you start explaining it, I can see how it would sound like that. It's not hypnosis.
It's not witchcraft. It's not sorcery. It works. And yes.
And it's not really that new.
No, it's not at
really
all.
Not. There's a lot of evidence-based research to support EMDR. So go research it on your own if you're listening. Okay, here's another question. You talked a little bit about any new treatments or medication available. Can you expand a little more on that? Of the newer treatments we mentioned EMDR, you mentioned some newer medications, but what else?
So here's our thinking. What we want to look at, and I know a lot of people who choose not to treat their ADHD through medication. Okay, that's a legitimate choice. The message I want to get out is you live in a modern world. Your brain is ill-adapted for the modern world because of all the pressure on the prefrontal cortex.
Yes.
The prefrontal cortex tells you what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. And as long as those demands are there, you need to find a way to meet them. Not everyone has to take medication to meet that, but using weed, alcohol to slow down your brain, that's not a thing, guys. It's actually going to make your ADHD and anxiety worse.
Yes.
And I know that's not popular to say, but I have so many clients who go, no, weed helps slow my brain down. Yes, it does, sir. But guess what happens right afterwards? It revs it right back up.
And it might be worse when it revs it back up.
Exactly.
And it takes them a minute sometimes to put the two together because they think, oh my gosh, I'm so anxious. They don't get that,
Yeah.
Speaking of anxiety, what would you tell a therapist like myself about, I don't know how to ask this, about we've already said there's some similar symptoms and characteristics for ADHD and anxiety. What are some key things to look for that is the difference? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So a lot of times ADHD folks can look like they have generalized anxiety disorder, bipolar.
Psychoticism.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So what I try to see is, does the person feel like or look like they're working really hard to do normal things?
Yeah.
In other words, is there a disparity in how hard they're working? And by the way, that college daughter I was talking about, there was a big disparity. She was working so hard to look normal, to get laundry done. You know, those mundane tasks around the world.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about, us being ill-adapted for the modern world. I mean, we can look like geniuses.
I know.
Creative.
Yeah.
But ask me to work with my calendar, I'm like, oh, this is the hardest math I'm doing right now. And then add a time zone into it, and I'm befuddled, right? That would be a sign that I have ADHD. So the having feelings about a mundane task. See, you, BJ, guess what you do in your beautiful neurotypical brain? You just do the laundry.
Yeah.
You don't conjure up a reason to do it.
No.
You just go.
No. Somebody's got to do it.
Right. And yet I will be like, oh, gosh, you know what? I'm going to put in a load of towels first. I like towels. I like I like drying the towels. I put in all this emotional effort.
It's almost like you're over reasoning with yourself.
100%.
Yeah, you're over reasoning, trying to talk yourself out of how to not do it.
Yeah, or to do it. Right. And so whereas neurotypical, you just have this, it's a straight line. You're just going here, there, I'll just
pretty
do
boring. Pretty white toast.
So I really think as a therapist, I would just look for that kind of reasoning behind those mundane tasks. Like, oh, I can't get my laundry done. Well, tell me about that. And a lot of times they'll diagnose themselves.
Yeah. It's really weird you mentioned diagnosis again and testing. We were talking about testing. I remember sitting in with a psychiatrist one time, and he just saw children. He was a child psychiatrist. So I was sitting in with him one time, and the mother was in there with the child, and he asked the mother, how does the child react when he drinks caffeine? And the mother's like, he doesn't have a reaction. He doesn't get hyped up like other kids and everything. And the psychiatrist told me later, he's like, it's not an official diagnostic tool, but it really kind of tells you a lot.
Yep. That's exactly. So, what hypes up other people makes me calm and focused. And so by the way, I'm sure a lot of your clients are self-medicating with Red Bull.
Oh, Monster, Red Bull,
yep.
Whatever else they can get their hands on.
And so I want your listeners to understand if you're doing that already, that's not good for your body. They'll wear and tear on your body. I know you're young. Don't do it. If you could instead get medicated, it's easier on your body.
It's easier. Do you find that a lot of people who have, I guess, undiagnosed ADHD lean towards substance abuse?
We do. And this is so sad. And this is why I get a little going. This isn't a gift. In fact, do you know the research on ADHD untreated? This is Russell Barkley's research. We live 13 years less than our cohort. 13 years is a lot.
Because why? What's the reasoning?
Well, first of all, he just did the longitudinal research, right? The reason is whatever neurotypicals have more of, we have less of. And inverse is true. Whatever neurotypicals have less of, we have more of. So let's just take diabetes, okay? Type 2 diabetes is on the rise in this country. If you're neurotypical, that can be managed through diet and exercise.
Sure.
Right? But now let's say you're ADHD and you tend to have an addictive personality and you're like, but I want potato chips and chocolate right now. Right? And so there's that. There's also risky behavior, just getting males through the teenage years. It is so tragic how many males have died that I know of with ADHD that was untreated. Mm-hmm. So that's why I get a little feisty about it's not a gift, guys. This is a serious neurological difference.
Yes.
Because it's dangerous to be ADHD untreated. And again, untreated doesn't mean you have to be medicated. It means you're addressing it somehow.
That's right. And that you have it too.
Yes. Gosh,
Tamara, this hour has gone by. It's flown by. And if you've noticed, I didn't get to hardly any of the questions that I sent you on the show because your answers would lead to more questions in my head. So I thank you so much for being on the show. This is wonderful. And it sounds like wonderful work that you're doing. I mean, do you have a wait list yourself? At the center?
Yeah. I'm not taking new clients this year because I'm working on that little thing called a book.
Yeah.
And running a business. But there are ADHD coaches. So, if your students are looking for ADHD coaches, they don't have to come to the ADHD Center. We do have coaches here, but you could go to ADHD Coaches or Organization, ACO. That's a place. There's a whole list of coaches there. You can check out and find a coach.
Wonderful. I didn't even know. Thank you so much. What about your book? This book is released and it is, can you buy it just anywhere? Amazon, anywhere?
Wherever books are sold.
Sellers.
Yep.
Have you got a website? Your website?
I do.
Personal website? What is it?
Yep. It's TamaraRosier.com.
Okay. And that's spelled ROSIER.
Yeah. Or you could just go to Amazon. Your brain's not broken. Not that Amazon needs me to plug them, but
Well, and go down that rabbit hole. No pun intended. Thank you so much again for being on the show. Don't forget, our shows are recorded and podcasted on the Apple Podcast, audioboom.com, and voices.ua.edu. You can just type in Brain Matters and you'll find some of our past shows. There's also a link to voices.ua.edu on the Counseling Center's website at counseling.ua.edu. And I like to thank the people who've made our show possible. First of all, Dr. Greg Vanderwall, a Grand Rapids, Michigan hometown boy. He's the executive director at the Counseling Center. Terry Siggers from the Office of Student Media, my production assistant, and my colleague, Catherine Howell, my other colleagues at the Counseling Center, the WVUA staff who help us edit the show every week, and my guest tonight, Dr. Tamara Rosier. Join us next week where we're going to have another very interesting and timely topic, college athlete mental health. So tune in. We'll be here same time, same place, same station next week. Thanks again for listening to Brain Matters, and good night.
This show is not intended as a substitute for professional counseling. Further, the views, opinions, and conclusions expressed by the show hosts or their guests are their own and not necessarily those of the University of Alabama, its officers, or trustees. Any views, opinions, or conclusions shared on the show do not create a relationship between the host or any guest and any listener, and such a relationship should never be inferred. If you feel you're in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, please contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or